Well, hello everyone. Welcome back, one and all, to the Dr. Nasser Shake Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasser. Let's get right into it, folks. As you can see, this is my prediction as of September 17th, 2024, where I've got Trump and Vance with 345, Harris Walsh 193. I'll tell you where my differentiating factors are from others that are out there. So let's take a look at this electoral map. As you see here, Nevada, I've given Arizona, which is what everybody is saying is going to Trump. I think New Mexico by a lean, 1 to 2%. If you go up here, I think Minnesota is a lean of 1 to 2%. I think Wisconsin is going to be in the 3 to 5% category. I believe Michigan is going to be the same, somewhere in that, 1 to 2%. I think PA is going to be closer to 5. I think Virginia is flipping, and I think Virginia is going to be in that, 1 to 3 range. I don't believe North Carolina is a swing state, so I put that firmly in the Trump column. And last but not least, I've got New Hampshire flipping as well by about a 1 to 2 margin as well. And I've already given Georgia, to Trump. So that's where I differentiate from what's out there. My 4 picks that are different, obviously, are I'm giving New Mexico, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Virginia, to Trump, which is why I've got him at the 345 mark. Also in Nebraska, 2, I've got that as a lean, towards Trump. Would I be upset if New Mexico goes Democratic or Minnesota goes to Harris or, New Hampshire stays blue, Virginia stays blue? Heck no. But everybody basically is saying that those are, tilting or leaning, towards Harris. I have my views and what I've looked at from the data and what I'm extrapolating it from and giving a look. And I'll give you my reasons why. So let's take a look at the latest Rasmussen poll, that's out there that sort of increases my probability that I'm thinking that this is why Trump is overperforming and is going to continue to overperform as he does in the polls. Let's take a look at that Rasmussen poll, and then we'll take a look at some videos of CNN and what they've been saying in terms of the undecideds, and then a New York Times Siena poll that came out back just about a week ago that further solidifies why I'm thinking in terms of giving these states, these 4 other battleground states, towards, to Trump. Okay, so let's go to the Rasmussen poll and take a look at this, folks. So here, folks, you see what Rasmussen does is that they're the only pollster out there that also keeps a running tabulation average, for basically a 5-day rolling average. And as you can see here, this was polling that was done this past Sunday, ended on Thursday. And as you can see here, they basically track what they're seeing out there. So as you can see, back on September 10th, Trump was up 5. And they have their number of people that they've contacted. I'd say probably in the low 300s to the upper 300s. I think only one time back here on September 12th, they had 486. But most of these numbers are somewhere in around, the 320s to 380, people that they've contacted. Then you see on September 11th, the next day, it was tied, 48-48. The difference was 0. September 12th, Trump goes up by 6. September 15th. So this was when they started, it reverses. And now Trump's down by 6. So you're going to have these differences. But what's the nice thing about when you look at Rasmussen is it's not just a snapshot like 2 weeks ago when they dropped it and they held on to their data, or, it's not sporadic. These are ones, and then they do drop their other polls, after every week. They give you the crosstabs in terms of what's happening and give you a much more in-depth, razor pinpoint, laser focused on the questions or whatever, but this obviously nightly. And then you see here another swing from September 15th, September 16th. It goes back up, another swing of plus 12. So could this be an outlier? Could this be an outlier? It gives you an idea, but at least you see here that where Trump, he's up plus 4, up plus 6, up plus 6, up 3, up 5, up 6, up 6. The majority of the time, he's in that, let's say, 3 to 4 range on Rasmussen. And let's understand, folks, that in the last few cycles, Rasmussen reports, well, they were in the top 3 or 4 of pollsters that were, pretty spot on. I mean, there was Atlas Intel that we've been talking about, and then it was Trafalgar, and then there was Rasmussen reports. So that being as it said, if you're talking plus 6, let's even assign that they're off. And let's say, even if you say, for example, that it's tied to 0, let's say it's 0, it's still a tie. Well, here's the fact of the matter. Electorally speaking, maybe if it's a tie, he doesn't get to 345. He's in the, low 300s to 300, in the 300 teens. If it's a 0-0, but the chances of him winning the Electoral College are nearly 99% if he's going in tied, because the Democrats need to be up at least 4 to have a shot. 3 would just be that razor thin, and they'd have to have everything fall right for them if they were up 3. But if he's tied compared to what he, previously in 2016 and 2020, when he was down, 7 or 10, respectively, to either Clinton or Biden, when you take a look at the RCP averages, polling on every single day of those election cycles compared to what they are today, I mean, folks, it's so, like I said, you want to give the benefit of the doubt and, shave off 4, 5, 6 points. Okay, we're tied. I'd rather be tied than be down. And if he's up 1 or 2, that literally spells, doom for the Democrats. Now let's take a look and see what happens in terms of, if you take a look at the undecideds, and then we'll take a look at the New York Times poll, folks, which is even more devastating. So let's take a look at Harry Enten and his graphs on CNN. Watch this.
On how they plan to vote in November, that as the clock is, of course, ticking for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump to try to win those voters over less than 50 days. CNN's senior data reporter Harry Enten is joining us now. How many are there? Because it's kind of hard to believe.
It's kind of hard to believe, but the bottom line is that 4% in the average of polls, 4% of voters say that they are undecided. That is just half the level that we saw in 2020, well less than the 10% we saw at this point in 2016. So the bottom line is, in this particular election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are focusing their attention on this tiny, tiny sliver, much lower than we're used to. In fact, it's the lowest level of undecideds that we've seen in polling at this point this entire 21st century.
You know what? That is not surprising at all, that number is so low. But within the margin of error, all the polls that you've been looking at, that number is extremely significant.
Exactly. It can make all the difference in the world.
So what do these undecideds care about? What are their big issues?
What are their top issues? Well, perhaps not surprisingly, 30% say the economy, inflation. That's number one. But number two, they actually don't have a top issue. 28% say there is no top issue, which perhaps isn't so surprising given that they're probably not as tuned into politics. They might care more about the characteristics of the candidates themselves rather than the issues that they represent. But I think that you get this.
And this is where I feel that if you took a look in 2016, those people that made their decision at the very end, those people ended up breaking for Trump. So as Harry's talking about, this could be those low information voters, or voters, as they say, there's no top issue for them. So how do you go about attracting them? Well, this is where it gets up on social media. Maybe they see a clip and they look at it and they go, oh, maybe it could be the endorsement by, Taylor Swift. In both ways, they could have seen that endorsement and said, wow, Taylor Swift is endorsing Kamala. I guess I'll do that. Or it could go the other way. Taylor Swift is endorsing Kamala. Oh, I can't believe that. I'm not voting for Kamala. And then now that's a double hit because obviously they've got something against Taylor Swift now that they didn't realize. So it could backfire on Taylor Swift, backfire on Kamala. So that could be it. Could be a number of things in terms of, and that's why social media, depending upon, these memes are out there. So who knows what entices if there's no top issue? It's got to be personality. Maybe some of these are going to remember, these low propensity voters will remember and say, you know what? Things were a little bit better during Trump's time. There was no war, had a little bit more money in my pocket. Maybe, the job situation was a little better for them back then than it is now. And maybe they just don't like Trump because they just think that, he's got a loud mouth. He's always on the attack. He's always, tweeting. He's saying this. They don't like it. They don't like his personality, whatever it is. But they go, I don't like Kamala either, but I liked some of the things that he did, pull the lever for Trump. So that's another reason why I think in terms of where the electorate will go, where if it is already +2, +3, with most of these polls that are respected and are not right-leaning pollsters at all and are not, puff polls or push polls that are out there. Anyways, let's continue.
Large chunk of undecideds, right, or the large chunk within the undecideds who say there's no top issue. That, of course, makes it difficult for the campaigns to go after him because what exactly are you going to talk about to the folks who say, wait a minute, we don't have a top issue?
Right. That's a hard thing, but obviously the economy, that is the issue that seems to be across all. So there are a lot of people, we just sort of mentioned this, that don't really understand how anyone could be undecided at this point in the election cycle and with this particular election. So what's the deal?
What's the deal? Well, I think this might sort of get at it. 2024 is the most important election of my life. 72% of Trump backers say it is, 70% of Harris backers say it is, but just 24% of undecideds say it is. So the bottom line is they don't actually think there's that much on the line going on here, and that is, I think, part of the reason why they're willing to stay back and just say, you know what, I don't really necessarily like either of these folks. I don't think this is the most important election, so you know what, I'm going to continue to be undecided. Of course, there's just 4% of them, but that 4% is going to make all the difference in the world come November.
They very well could, but if they're not paying attention, like you said.
So now if you take a look at this New York Times Siena poll back from September 9th, so a day before the debate, right? Take a look at this, folks. The liberal New York Times Siena poll had, at that time, Trump with a 100% chance of winning the Electoral College. Popular vote, 48%. He's only winning by 1 point in the national poll. But that 1 point, according to the New York Times, is giving him a probability of 99.7. Now, if you go down here, you take a look. Look at this here, folks. This is back in 2016 when the New York Times gave Trump a 15% chance. I think it was even less than that as we even got closer. And they literally gave him a 0% chance to win PA, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And we all know how those dominoes fell. So these are the same pollsters that are telling us now that Trump is in the lead. Let's listen and see how that tracks with Kellyanne Conway and Jesse Waters as they sort of break down this poll. And watch this right now.
So what will they try next? Kellyanne Conway is a former counselor to the president, and she joins us now. This has the Democrats panicking, Kellyanne. What does it tell you?
Tells me an awful lot. The New York Times Siena poll was a huge indictment of how Kamala Harris has frittered away any chance she had to recast herself as this fresh-faced, new blood, transformative transitional candidate, basically just by hiding. And the men around her have hidden this woman. They're afraid to have her speak to the press. They're afraid to leave her alone with the public. They're afraid to have her do even a 16-minute interview without her comfort pet, Tim Walz, by her side. And Jesse, all this is now pouring into the polling. What does the polling tell us? You mentioned change. 61% of the people that the New York Times surveyed over the weekend said they want the next president to be a change from Biden. Then they were asked the seminal question, who represents change more? Trump, 53, Harris, 28. He's seen as the insurgent with an incumbent's record that people miss. They feel like they were more prosperous, they were more safe, life was more fair, there were more opportunities at the time, and less chaos and crisis around the world. She is seen as an incumbent who's running away from being an incumbent. And so her better strategy would have been to hook her into the Biden-Harris legacy, try to make the case that she hadn't had her hand on the tiller, so she needs 4 more years to finish what started. But instead, she's trying to distance herself from Biden, and no one's buying it. I thought the biggest thing in the poll really was what I see as the new gender gap in American politics. For decades, it's been said that the Republicans have a hard time attracting women. Donald Trump can't win women voters. Well, he beat the Queen Bee, Hillary Clinton, and the majority electorate, as we have been since 1964, were female. The gender gap is now Kamala Harris's problem in attracting male voters. Trump is beating her by 17 points among men overall in that New York Times Siena poll, and she's only beating him by 10 points among women. That's a disaster for her.
That is really
She's not even
shocking.
getting typical. She's not even. This is New York Times polling.
Yeah.
Jesse, on
It doesn't
Election
make
Day
any
2016.
Well, I guess
Election
it does make
2016.
sense, though. It does make sense because it's Kamala Harris.
Yes,
Right?
correct. That's the whole thing.
So as you heard, folks, and you saw it, devastating numbers. Liberal pollster, no friend of the Republicans, no friend of conservatives, and definitely no friend of Donald Trump at all. But you saw the numbers. Who represents change? 63% said they wanted change. Over 50% said Trump was that marker of change. Around a quarter of the respondents said it was Kamala Harris. Then the gender gap. He's winning by 17 among white men. There was a poll that was just undertaken, and why I'm talking about this huge electoral landslide. The NAACP did a poll showing that 25% of black men under the age of 50 are voting for Kamala Harris. 49% of women. Women? I mean, if you can't get a plurality, I'm sorry, men, 49%, so 49% men are going to vote, but 26% of them said that they were going to vote for Trump. You can't even get 50% over to win that? In that same poll, 8% of black women said they were going to vote for Trump. And the gender gap, right now they say is only 10 points with women. These are devastating numbers. So when you take a look at the crosstabs, when you take a look at what's happening inside the polls, when you take a look at who these pollsters are, how they've derived their numbers, how they're not playing it to one side, although you will hear all about that, from the other side, that these are right-wing pollsters. Well, we'll see who's right when it comes to the election on that day, in November. But until then, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasser Sheikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasser. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel, like, share, and follow. You all know what to do. Hit that notification bell for updates when we put out our new videos. Take a look at the links above and below. My final thought is always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.